Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Ryan. How's it going, Ryan?
It is going live.
It's going live, it's going well. Our buddy Dion is running a little bit late. He was having some phone issues, but he should be joining us in a few moments. But it's great to be here with you, Ryan, and I'm excited to be diving deep into more Solomonic magic. So this is going to be a
I think
lot
we've
of
all
fun.
got some juicy stuff today. I think we had a little chat just then, and like you've definitely got some juicy stuff. I've
Oh
definitely
yeah,
got some juicy stuff, and Dion's always got the juicy stuff.
absolutely,
Dion's a bag of
absolutely.
juice.
It's gonna get so wild and intense. Just you guys wait. We got some craziness, and
I'd like I'd,
it,
li- I'd like to start, if you don't mind, just with a little observation that you guys made last week, and that is that we can associate all the stuff that Solomon does with Saturnian magic. But he is Saturn, just like Moses is Saturn. He seems to, and Noah is Saturn. Is this Saturnian character? And I was just thinking when you were talking about his ring, well, that'll be Saturn's ring, won't it? Because you can through certain means you can observe Saturn's ring with minimal equipment. You could probably
absolutely.
take
And go
a
ahead.
cow's eye. It's often been said they take the lens of a cow's eye, and you could probably see Saturn's ring, so Solomon's ring.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? And that idea of Saturn is such a primordial, important image because it is that in terms of their solar system, it is the slowest moving object. It's the object through which we measure everything else against. And
Mm-hmm.
who is Solomon within all of these mythic traditions? He is this primordial ancient king. And when we dug deeper, like in my episode, when I looked into the Arabic and it's into the Afghan and Pakistani traditions, they all have this Suleiman of the pre-Adamite tradition, who's basically some kind of god figure that they're,
Mm-hmm.
because this is relating to some kind of ancient pagan thing. It is this Saturnian father god. It is relative. And we have to remind ourselves, right? So much of the Hebraic tradition is about doing that euhemerization, where they take um, deities and stories from other cultures around them, and they reinterpret them through their lens. So they take
Mm-hmm.
gods and turn them into good kings, and
Yes.
they become servants of the one true Lord. And I'm
Mm.
not saying like this is anything special. All traditions do this, but we have to remind ourselves that this is very much what's happening in the Bible. And there is this
Well,
euhemerization that's going on.
you could relate what you just said to this first father principle, which is what Saturn is. Is the progenitor of the other gods. He's the grandfather. Well, Moses is the grandfather,
Mm.
of the Israelites after they moved from Egypt. Noah is an antediluvian grandfather.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a great observation.
Always, right? Always, right? And it's this primordial builder. Solomon ushers in the golden age. That's where he is related to the primordial Saturnian image, right? He builds the first like the temple that all other temples are idealizing. So this is that really important thing. It's that golden age that is so quintessential towards this image as well, right?
Do you remember when we first met? I told you one of the things that sparked my interest in all this stuff was that I had a lot of mushrooms, and at the end of the trip, I saw a strange temple complex, and God or a
Yeah,
masculine
I
voice
do remember
telepathically
this.
told me to build Solomon's temple. Yeah, so I didn't really figure out what it meant straight away. It took me years to discover. Obviously, you are the temple. You are the
Right.
temple that is to be built without the sound of hammer or chisel clinking. And the only way you're going to
Right.
do that, you can't do it with a real stone, but you can do it with yourself.
You can do it with your shamir, and we'll be getting into that later today when we start to unpack this
Yeah.
idea of what the shamir is. Is it a seed? Is it a worm? Is it the pineal gland? It's going to get pretty wild. But this is the thing, right? I believe that, Solomon is really this quintessential white magician, and he becomes, he takes on all of these white magician characteristics from all of the various pagan traditions. And because he's kind of allowed to thrive within the Christian tradition, we see this explicitly happening later within medieval age and the Renaissance, where Solomon becomes the quintessential magician, and he has the knowledge of all of these ancient traditions. He becomes a representative of not only of Jewish knowledge, but of ancient Egyptian and of Mithraic and all this other stuff. It's really kind of interesting, you know?
He appears in Papyri Greco-Magica, for example.
Yeah.
In a similar way. And that is, you know, almost everything in there is some weird bastardized compendium of all kinds of gods, languages, glossolalia, your characters. It's
so interesting too, because when we look at the earliest stuff, right? Because we've been doing this textual analysis for a while now, looking at all of the earliest references, and we started with our Bible and the Testament of Solomon and the Nag Hammadi. And all of these, which is interesting, it's even in the earliest sources, he is still this quintessential wizard commanding demons. You know, that image exists from the earliest iteration. You know, I thought it was really striking how the Gnostics hate Solomon and say that he's this bastard son of demons and that he is possessed by demons. No, and they even accuse him of being a worshiper of Asterion and one of the Ammonites. Like it's pretty intense how it gets.
It's strange though. How even in popular culture, Solomon's magic has become black magic.
Yeah. Well, because
he's a white magician. I mean, for everybody out there, he's controlling demons, but they're his own demons. They're your demons. And when you look at the Testament of Solomon or the Song of Solomon, it's pretty obvious. You know, it'll be some kind of lust or nostalgia, or you know, they're personal demons.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it also has to do with the cultural clash of the age, right? We have to look at the rise of Solomonic magic, especially the grimoire tradition, which you're going to get into, through the lens of the culture clash of the Crusades and the Jihad period, because that's when that magic arises. And we see this within the Islamic tradition. Solomon is always, and that Solomonic magic is always kind of good, right? At least in the earliest iterations of it. And I think a lot of the reason why it becomes evil within the European mind is because it's associated with the Islamic other. You know, even people are translating it and they're bringing it into a European or a Platonic framework, even though they're because we've got to remember, it's a lot of this narcissism of small difference. The Christians and the Muslims are almost the same. So it's like when we're looking at it, it's easy for us to gloss over this, but to them, these are huge differences. And this would be seen as Arabic magic at this time, the Pika tricks, you know, it's coming from that side of the Abrahamic tradition.
But which gave birth through the Templars, that Eastern religious, deeper knowledge came over with the Templars, but they were demonized as well. Of course, it's been Baphomet and heads in boxes and kissing each other's bottoms. Something we can't gloss over, though, is that Dion's here.
Yeah. How's it going, Dion? Good to see you.
Life is beautiful. I made it.
You made it. We were just kind of going over this image of Solomon, relating it to earlier pagan ideas related to that grandfather kind of Saturn. And then talking about this idea of like the hidden Western esotericism, the unlocking of the pineal gland and the building of the temple within. And then we were just kind of rehashing all of the texts that we've been talking about and all of the various, basically what we found was that even in the earliest iterations, Solomon remains this magician. He's kind of the quintessential magical figure, and either loved or vilified. And then when you came in, we were getting into this idea of why was he vilified, or why is Solomonic magic seen as evil within the West? And I think a part of it is because it's outside of the Catholic tradition and it's seen as that Islamic other, you know? It's related to the Arab peoples. And for that reason, you know, especially at that time when the height of the Crusades, but just to fill you in where we're coming from.
That's right. That's right.
So Dion, why don't you recap where you've been showing us in your previous episodes, and you know, give us your understanding of Solomon to contrast.
Um, well, part of it, I would say, Solomonic folklore. Because a lot of this is folklore, because we're drawing from the Zohar, the Nag Hammadi, the Bible, the Quran.
Thousand and One Nights.
Yeah,
Talmud.
there's all these different agglomeration or aggregor. We're aggregating different stories and versions of Solomon, and also I like looking into his family, the folklore surrounding them, the rings, the outfits, you know, the folk tales.
Robes.
Oh yeah, the robes.
So much magic items, right? That's a big thing that I'm going to get into on our next episode when we continue, because I found this amazing book that's just diving into the idea of the magical items that are in his treasure box, which again is one of these yogic kind of esoteric images, right? Inside of Solomon's treasure box, he has his ring. He's got his magic demon containing bottle. Okay, he has his magic knot. Why does he have a Celtic knot? It's freaking weird, man. And he has his magic cloak. And then he has a magic staff. These are all the quintessential wizard stuff that we see in the later, like, European traditions. Are they not, Ryan? You should know all this.
Well, I should know. Here's the thing, right? So I thought I kind of knew Solomon. I thought I knew plenty about him. I wouldn't hear much new stuff. But I understand and know about almost nothing that you guys have talked about on every single episode. It's such a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's so deep. And everyone, it's like we were talking about this, the beauty and the wildness of myth is they keep growing and people keep adding to it and creating new iterations over time. And that Solomon myth has just grown, become such a giant, you know?
Well, he's, as you were saying previously, we've got Hermes for the more alchemical stuff, who's a very similar figure. But then when you go in like all out, balls out magic, we've got Solomon, you know, and they're very similar figures. And we just like to pile on, keep giving to this character because he represents the thing that you're doing. So, of course, you're going to attribute these things to him. But again, then you've got all the original folklore that Dion keeps looking into. And it's just, there's so much more out there because of all the different cultures and all the different periods that are adding to him. I'm going to talk about something from the 1700s, which is pretty much as late as you can get with it all. But I'm sure you're going to talk about early, you know, much earlier things.
Oh, yeah.
You're talking about a 2,000-year, over 2,000-year time span here for things to be piled on.
Right. And it seems almost certain that this idea of Solomon, Suleiman, Sol, this grandfather figure is far older even than the Bible, right? Like far older than this surface level tradition we're even talking about. This is why there's so much here, because people are connecting to that primordial mythic image that keeps cycling around. There's a wealth to be drawn.
I'm almost positive that character of Saturn goes back to the Stone Age.
Oh, almost certainly.
I mean, yeah. He wields a flint scythe. You know, it's hammered in that he's got a flint scythe, which is a Stone Age item.
Yep. And I just keep thinking about this, right? Saturn would be the biggest thing that we could see in the stars without aid, right? With just the naked eye, you could see Saturn. And it would be the most stable thing, the most stable, permanent thing in the sky. So of course, our ancient ancestors are going to be obsessed with it. They're comparing everything and measuring everything to Saturn, right? That's why it's the original sun in that sense, because it's the original thing from which you compare against, you know?
And we mustn't
it doesn't change.
He's also the pole god. He's the god at the top of the pole. He is, and there's something deep there. In fact, I'll get into that a little bit with my presentation. Well, it seems as though before there was sun and moon worship, it was pole worship. And it seems really old. I was looking at the Ainu religion the other day. The Ainu are the indigenous Japanese population.
Okinawa.
And yeah, all over the place. They're a very small population now. They're almost completely absorbed into that Japanese Korean genome that's there now.
They do blue tattoos.
Yeah. They look European as well. They got sideburns and they can grow full beards, and they're often called like the Europeans of Japan. There's something going on there. I think it's got something to do with Babylon. Oh, there's something going on there. It would be another episode in itself. There's lots of kanji, the writing that's exactly the same in Hebrew as it is in Japanese. But again, another episode. But they have a ceremony that's tying a bear to a pole. It's like their main ceremony. They look after a bear cub, grow it till it's too big, but the whole time it's staked to a pole. So it's Ursa Major, the bear constellation, which is it's a European thing. That it's like Sumeria, maybe a bit before then, but it's like very old. And we could just see there's an old pole god, there's an old pole religion, which I see as being the religion behind all the religions. It's Saturn before Jupiter.
Yeah, you see a lot of that, and it seems to be related, to that great mother tradition, which in terms of the archaeology is by far the most well accounted for and the oldest. We have, it's so hard when we're dating stone, but you see some of these Venus figures, like there's the Venus of Klippendorf, there's the Venus in Israel. Some of these are pushing 100,000, 200,000 years old.
Yeah.
Right? It's absolutely insane. That connection, the mother-child worship, right? The mother and the child lover. And this to me is representative of a lot of that polar magic. It comes out of that time in its infinite point in ever expansive time, You
can see with some of those figurines, they're clearly brains. There's one that looks like a chicken. You know the one I'm on about? It's clearly just an upturned brain to me. And then there's other ones, like there's a Siberian lion. Have you seen that one? It's made out of mammoth tusk.
Yeah. Yes. Like, you've shown it before.
I think it's 60,000 years old. To me, that's Leo, but it's not Leo. It's like, it's a lioness. It doesn't have a mane on it. So there's, again, it's this goddess tradition.
Right.
The first venerated seem to be goddesses.
Yep. And we see this active patriarchal flipping, even with the Solomonic tradition, right? There's all of these vestiges of this ancient nature worship and this goddess worship. And he's accused of being connected to Astarte, right? Venus, Aphrodite. Really? He's connected to doing that. Oh, yeah. We'll see it even in the Talmud. So it gets interesting, right?
We can waffle all day. You know damn well Dion's got something far more interesting for us than we could ever conjure up from the back of our brains.
Dion, why don't you take it away and begin your presentation? Oh, sorry, this is mine.
Well, that looked good too. What was that? Was that a temple right there?
Yeah, so this is a actual model that this is from the a museum in Israel, and this is a model recreated based by these. This is created by a bunch of different rabbis at the turn of the century based on their esoteric understanding of the passages of the Bible. So this is an attempt at recreation, but from a mystical, rabbinical perspective. And I just thought it was really interesting and beautiful. And we can see what at least a 18th century Jewish tradition views as like what that temple would look like. Really cool.
I'd love some links to that when we're done, if you don't mind. It's particular interest of mine, considering God told me to build Solomon's temple.
I'll send it to you, right? Very cool stuff. But here we go. This is Dion. What do we got here, Dion? Is this a sacrifice of a red bull or something?
Oh, red heifer.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna get us in trouble, Dion.
Because before you could build that temple you were looking at right now, this has to happen. For this third temple. Considering this is the third episode, we're going to go into the third temple, which is the rebuilding of Solomon's temple. because that's what part of this mystery is about. And in order for that to take place, we need that red symbol to appear. And in this version, it's a red heifer. And you guys are familiar with this already. It's the end time prophecy thing. I won't go all into that. But what I find interesting is the formula of what happens after you burn the red heifer. Because what you do, you take the red heifer's ashes and it's mixed with cedar, hyssop, and scarlet colored wool. And then it's put into a water vessel of sacred water. That's our genie in the bottle. That's our Djinn in the bottle right there. And the scarlet thread appearing once again in order to rebuild the temple.
Yeah.
Sounds like mushrooms to me.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, well, I mean, we all know about bulls and cows and mushrooms. It's red.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You dry it out, crumble it up, put it in some water, drink it.
It also sounds like the virgin sacrifices, right? You would take the red-headed girl, the Amazonian girl, and you would burn her.
Well, so just to interject quickly, do you remember Ammon used to talk about a ginger kid with spots roasted in front of a fire?
Yes.
That was always the same analogy to me. I never said it to him, but that's what I think that is. I mean, it leaped out to me as that being the same as this.
Mm.
Well, the ginger, it's funny because the Ainu you were speaking about are some of them are gingers. That's what makes them famous there on the islands there. I'm
ginger down under, mate. I might be blonde on top, but I'm definitely ginger down under.
You got that mustache going, huh? Got that mustache going.
I'll show you if you like.
Well, let's get back to the prophecy, because I know you want to build your temple. You need a red heifer first, and that has to appear. And it's like I said, the formula, it's something that gets put into a vessel, into a water pot, because that's how you capture demons. And
does this not sound like the muse? Are you possessing the muse and putting her into the vessel of the body? Are you becoming possessed by the muse, Dion?
And like I said, and it's using cedar, hyssop, and a scarlet colored wool, which is dyed. And that's also a formula for snake bites as well. But go to the next image.
Oh, wow. This sounds like getting enthused. Wow.
And so we're talking about that scarlet colored thread that's been popping up in the past couple episodes. Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, Azazel, because Azazel's been popping up all over the episodes. That goat, and harnessing the power of the goats and demons to do things. Well, with these two goats, and remember the two brothers that fight over ownership of the kingdom. There's that symbology of the fighting of the two. They tie a scarlet thread onto the goat of Azazel. That's part of the ceremony. We hear of the other parts of the ceremony. The scapegoat is one of the terms for it, but the scapegoat has to have the red thread tied onto it, that scarlet cord, which will keep popping up.
Because that signifies the one that gets to live, the one that came first. Remember, you were telling us about that story in the Bible too, about the one twin that stuck its hand out first, and so they wrapped the red cord around it to signify you are the one who has birthright. Right? Yeah, because this whole thing, one twin is holy and divine, one twin is earthly and sacrificed, right? And we see this theme constantly, right?
And that's the term scapegoat.
It's Proto-Indo-European myth. It's two twins sacrificing the bull of heaven, essentially.
Absolutely. You see it in the Ashvins. You see it with Artemis and Apollo. You see, it's just the Dioscorides. We got it all over the place.
And if you think of the term scapegoat, that's a scapegoat. To escape is part of the terminology there. And they also tie red cords, part of this tradition, on beds and in homes as well, to keep away Lilith or Abazuth. We've talked about that because they go hand in hand. They're the same demon. A weather demon at that would snatch children. Go to the next image. There's that red string right there. You can buy it if you want to, you got some stuff to do. Because we were talking about Abazuth in the past episode. One of the things is that Solomon binds her to the temple by her hair. That magic hair, because it'll pop up, because hair pops up in a lot of our episodes, it'll always come up.
Before you skip here, I also find it really interesting, this red string tradition, red string as a protection against negative spirits, because it's such a common thing. You see it across Asia, You see it in the European traditions. We see it in the African traditions, and various iterations of how it got there. It's in India as well. Like, this got to be some ancient primordial thing to be so common, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a Brahmanic tradition.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you saw that. The marking Brahmins have a certain string or thread they have to wear. And talking of the Abazut, the demon there, to bind the demon with the red string, David also gets with the demon. This is in the Zohar. If people know what the Zohar is, David has sex with the demon one night. It's a demon that has snakes in her hair. Her name is Argot. And supposedly they give birth to a son named Asmodeus. That's an alternative version, as whereas Samael gives birth to Asmodeus. So this version, David is the father of Asmodeus.
Okay, that's wild, because this Asmodeus, we're going to see it. It comes up. They have a slightly different iteration in the Talmud when I get there, but it's called Ashmedai. But this is the primary villain that Solomon is constantly fighting with. And this is, we'll see. It's interesting.
A relative at that, maybe.
Maybe a relative. A demonic brother. Wow.
Yeah, there's more to the story. So
when I looked it up, and this might bring the red into it as well. He's basically an inverted Mars. If you understand the principles of Mars, which you could call it toxic masculinity, but he's basically Mars, the masculine principles in its bad aspects. Mars is often associated with the color red, blood, war, passion. And I've got to think about Dion's myriad other episodes where he talks about the different dyes, the kermes, all that stuff. And perhaps it's making you feel better, warding off the demons by absorbing into your skin. I've been thinking about this for a while. I can't track it down.
Well, mind you, the dyes they would have been using at those times are psychoactive. We know that. So that could be another way, because in contact, and we'll get a little bit at it later. Now, the scarlet cord, there's more to this. Let's go to the next image. We'll explore this scarlet cord. Well, yeah, they got an order of the scarlet cord. This is a Masonic order within an order within an order. You have to get 3 levels deep. First, you have to be a Mason in good standing. Then you get invited to another order. From there, they can tap you and bring you into the 3rd order, which is the Order of the Scarlet Cord, which is based off Solomonic magic, a whole bunch of weird Solomonic folklore. They got the Ark of the Covenant there.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the Ark, eh?
Yeah, wow. And it starts off with, one of the original orders came from the Order of David and Jonathan. Was the original name of one of the orders. And that's about a robe, remember? Jonathan gives David the robe. This deals with a robe or a fabric, giving somebody something to somebody. So go to the next image. Here they are carrying an ark. They are in London somewhere. And
they're wearing their magical breastplate, Dion. Their phylacteries engraved with chakra to protect them from demons. We've been talking about
this. It's the Shamir worm that cuts those stones.
Oh yeah.
That'll be at Temple in central London next to the Thames, which is where the Templars had their rites and rituals and churches.
And recreating Solomonic folklore. They got an and Thurman there, this is Levitical priesthood. They got a whole thing that they're practicing now, a theatrical version of it all. And I won't talk about all their degrees in this secret order, but we're going to talk about the 3rd degree, since it's the 3rd episode in the 3rd temple. At the 3rd degree, you become a healer or exorcist. Go to the next image. Well, before we even get to there, here's one of their seals. You can see. And it's based off, remember the scarlet cord that Rahab throws down the wall? And that deals with Joshua. And it's the 2 spies. It's the 2. And this will all be reconfigured later on. You'll see in the episode. But go to the next image. So here's the what you get when you get to the 3rd degree. Here's your seal. And it has a skull and bones on it, as well as an anointing horn. That's a horn, like a cornucopia? Yeah.
Is it a Shamir? There's a name for it.
Shofar. You're talking about the shofar. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
shofar, we've talked about that. If it's a kudo horn shofar, it has a perfect Fibonacci spiral, like pi, and it's used by Schauberger and other things. But for here, they would use it to anoint. They put oil in it and anoint people.
There.
Oh, yeah.
Is at 23.5 degrees. That's the ecliptic there. Like, that's perfectly 23.5 degrees.
Yep. That is the elliptical orbit, already a precession built into it right there.
Yeah.
People could say.
Saturn symbol. Yeah.
Yeah. And this horn is used to anoint all the different patriarchs, let's say. Or when you're a made man, you get anointed with oil. They would put oil in and put it on you. In some versions, the tip has a hole on it, and it can be used as a, let's say, a form of a phylactery, a dildo, let's say, with oil in it. There's other uses to everything, you know, when we see everything. So let's go to the next image, and that's for chrism, anointing. Yeah, because you know, like Samuel, he anointed David, and then David was anointed by Zadok. And that's one of the terms that'll come up is Zadok today, and put onto a horse or to a donkey before it was got turned into a made man. So we're talking about King Solomon and how he came to the throne is what I'm going to get into. He has brothers. We talked about the brothers in the past episode. Amnon was the name of the lead brother, and that was David's firstborn, and he was going to be the heir. He was going to be the king. But he rapes his sister Tamar. We talked about that. And they kill him. Here's Tamar right here going to Absalom, her brother. And this is one of Solomon's brothers, right here, Absalom, who tried to take over the throne from David. Because she came to him and says, hey, my brother raped me. And he's like, what? And David didn't do nothing? So he wants to take over. And what happens is, I didn't tell you what happened to Absalom. He gets chased out by his other brothers and by the people that David sends. And go to the next image. He gets caught by his hair on a tree while he's riding a donkey. Yeah, this is the Bible. This is in the Bible. You can go to the Bible. He's escaping from, this is Solomon's brother. Escaping, and his hair gets caught in the tree. He had special hair. Like we talked about, Samson's hair? They cut his hair, and all the different Medea's hair, and Abazu's hair, and Lilith's hair. Well, Absalom had special hair. Go to the next image. Oh, I thought I had it in there, but I think I had the saying. And in the saying is, that in the Bible verse, yeah, don't worry, they would weigh Absalom's hair once a year. He would shave it once a year. This is in the Bible. And they would weigh it against shekels to see how much it would weigh. Because he had magical properties with his hair. But his hair gets caught up, and that's how he dies. And he's left hanging there, and that's when they kill him. And it reminded me of Odin. Isn't Odin hung from a tree?
Yeah.
You know, the hanging man symbology is there. Because I know you guys work with the hanging man in Tarot.
Absolutely.
You know,
the hangman is all about those near-death experiences, right? Gazing into the abyss, facing an extreme challenge, and then overcoming it through adaptation, right?
Yes.
And facing you're facing your fears, near-death experience. Yeah.
And you know,
I mean that looks like a brain and spine almost perfectly there. The orientate. If you think about where your skull is placed on your neck. It's toward, you know, it's forwards. Most of the, you know what I mean? Your neck comes up at the back, and then it's the back of your head. So you can trace that over that. It looks like a brain to me, that almost perfectly like a brain and a spine.
Yeah.
I've got to think, has he got red hair as well?
Yeah, that's part of the theme is red hair. It's some of the bad characters in early paintings. Our archetypes have red hair, are red robes. It's part of you're dressing him in something to give him that spicy energy. I mean, even the horse you'll see, or his donkey, has a red robe on it as well.
What color was Rapunzel's hair?
Oh, that's Rapunzel, golden reddish hair. That was bright and golden. But
seems
yeah,
to deal with that within the Greco-Roman tradition. It seems to be with this lineage of the sun. People related to Helen or Medea or Hecate, they all seem to have the golden red hair.
yeah, yeah. So from here, let's go to the next image. So with Absalom gone, and I told the story last week about Adonijah. Solomon comes to power, and Solomon is the King Solomon. Eventually, he had some enemies. Everything was very powerful for Solomon. He built the temple, and everything was perfect. But then, and you know what? We talked also about the temple was built by help from Hiram, the widow's son. Well, another widow's son comes along and gives him problems, and the name is Jeroboam. And here's an image of him right on one of these biblical pictures. And he was a widow's son. He was the head of the builders, and he came from a slave. And this is not Hiram of Tyre. This is Jeroboam. And at a certain point, Solomon figures out, like, hey, you're going to come to power. You're going to try to take all this away from me. And he has to go flee into hiding in Egypt. But one of the stories in the Bible talks about a prophet takes a robe, and a red robe right there at that, and rips it up into 12 pieces and gives him 10 of the pieces. This is symbolic of the kingdom splitting. And you got the northern tribes and the southern tribes. And this is when they become split, Israel. And then it becomes the 10 tribes of the north. And he hands them 10 pieces of a red robe, a ripped robe. And that's to symbolize that. And he goes into hiding in Egypt. And then what happens is Solomon's son takes over. His name is Rehoboam. And he's not, and they're having problems. And this is Jeroboam. He eventually goes up north and he builds his own Solomonic temple to rival the temple in the south. And so people start going there. Go to the next image. All right, so here's Jeroboam. And that story's in the Bible. The red robe, or a robe getting ripped into 12 pieces, and he gets 10 pieces, symbolic of the 10 tribes going up north, him building a new Solomonic temple. At a certain point, a prophet comes to the temple, and because they were doing Baal worship. And he comes to threaten them, like, hey, God wants to bring the old ways back. You're doing this Baal worship. And he points out his hand to silence the prophet here. And look at his hand. His hand withers. And it says it in the Bible, his hand withers. And it can't work no more until God makes it work again. And it's funny because it reminds me of the Noah when they pull on the finger, because that's a big part of the Solomonic mysteries in the Masonic stuff is Mahabon, is the term for this hand, for these, your hand can do lots of things.
There's also this one tradition, we talked about it in one of our very, very early episodes, but it was the nursemaid of Mother Mary. And she doesn't believe that Mary was a true virgin. And she inserts her hand into her to check for palpitations and see if she's pregnant. And then her hand withers. The midwife's hand withers. She becomes cursed for doubting the virginity of Mary.
And pulls it out. Because it was burning.
Yeah.
She went to palpitate her and pulled it out because it was burning. And the hand has power. You can command things like Solomon would point and command things like he was trying to do, but when your hand doesn't work, it gets withered. And it's the opposite of the magic. It's taking away your pointing finger or your power to command. It's at this point, Jeroboam's wife goes to speak to one of the prophets. Go to the next image. I think I got an image of it too, maybe.
Yeah, I wonder if that withering of the hand has to do also with like the taking away of reason, right? The taking away of one's faculty and ability to speak truth, to write, because you have to make those hand signs.
Yeah.
Right? The 9999, the 666, the invocation of reason.
Yep, and that's what it says. It says that he tries to point at the altar and command the spirits of Baal, and his hand withers. It does something, and then God has to restore it. And so I think I had an image of his wife, or maybe I didn't, but we're going to go to the next image, and here we'll get to King Hezekiah. And this deals with the temple, because remember, the temple's destroyed at this point. Solomon's dead. Jeroboam is the king up north. Rehoboam is Solomon's son down south. They rebuild the temple. They build a fake one up there. And eventually King Hezekiah comes along and he rebuilds Solomon's temple. And this will be in the Bible. You can see this. Now, this symbol right here was recently found not too long ago. And this is King Hezekiah's seal. We talked about Solomon's seal, Melchizedek's seal, the seal of Muhammad. They found Hezekiah's seal, and it has Egyptian symbols on it. It has the solar wings with ankhs. And around the writing, it does say King Hezekiah. And it's a
nation.
Yeah.
That's like Paleo Hebrew.
Yeah. It was found recently. There's lots of articles about it. And it was used to stamp things. They made a stamp out of it. It's a seal. Because the kings had their seals. They had talismanic powers.
That's what the signet ring is, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's like its signature. That's where we get it, because you'd stamp in the wax or stamp in the clay with your ring.
With your ring. And if your hand's withered, you can't do it. It takes away that power. But that's why your hands, you're commanding with your seal. Now Hezekiah's seal, is quite Egyptian. Hezekiah's seal, and Hezekiah rebuilds Solomon's temple, and he destroys the Nehashatan, which is the bronze serpent. Remember, Moses puts that serpent to heal them. Well, Hezekiah destroys it. Hezekiah is a form of Solomon because he rebuilds the temple. Go to the next image there. Let's see what I got.
Oops, sorry, it was just stuck there.
Okay, here we go. We got one for Hezekiah. At a certain point, he gets some bad news. Hezekiah, on hearing this report, King Hezekiah tore his clothes, his robes. Now, I want to let you know, tearing your robes in the Bible happens dozens of times. This is a symbology. Because we talked about people giving robes and acquiring your robe to have a magic power, or flying carpet as a robe. But when some shit goes down, you tear the robe. And that's symbolic of suffering or angst or despair. And in this version, though, he put on a sackcloth and entered the house of the Lord. That's the new Solomonic temple, the second temple. Now, what is the sackcloth? The sackcloth is Elijah's girdle. It's goat skin. It's an aegis that they would wear underneath their clothes. And it happens in several verses in the Bible. They got a goat skin underneath their robes, that they tear the robes. Watch, go to the next image. Oh, here's another one and this is in a different part of the Bible. This is Jeroham, which is not Jeroboam. This is another king later, a different time period. And what happened is, when the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes, and as he passed by on the wall, the people saw the sackcloth under his clothes next to his skin. They saw that he's wearing a goat skin girdle. A lot of the patriarchs wear goat skin girdles and prophets to prophesy.
Because they're all satyrs. They're all worshiping Saturn.
It's very Dionysian.
Well, remember in the Testament,
John the Baptist.
Yeah, John the Baptist is a clear Dionysian wild man.
And remember, it wasn't the Testament of Abraham where Abraham gets the armament of Azazel, which is a goat skin.
Yeah, it's a goat skin.
And if I could tell you more about this story, the reason the king flips out when he heard the words of the woman, what's the words of the woman? Well, she comes to the wall while the king's up on the wall, and she says, hey, this is a take on the Solomon story of the two women and the baby. What she tells him is something a little different. She says, hey, we're having a drought and we're tough on food. So one of my neighbors came and she said, hey, if you cook and eat your baby and put him in the pot, we'll eat your baby today. And then tomorrow when we're hungry next time, we'll eat my baby. And so she goes, and so he says, we did it. And
wow.
Yeah, this is in the Bible. It's at 2 Kings, not 6:30, but 6:28, two verses before. And she says, yeah, so we ate our baby. And the next day we went to find the woman. She took off with her baby. So she goes, and he goes, oh my God, he flips out,
Wow.
And this is part of that Solomonic thing with the two sons. Which son is the sacrifice? It's a theme. It's a reoccurring theme with goats and Azazel. It's all in Azazel there because he has it underneath. He rips off his thing to show Azazel.
So there are many times especially in the Bible, like in the New Testament, but there are many times where, and these two twins, when I really like drilled down into it, they appear in the tarot as well. The two twins, one to be sacrificed. What I personally think it is that you got the left hemisphere, right hemisphere paradigm of the brain is really ancient. It's very old indeed. It went out of favor for a while, but it's come back into favor now. I think what it is that you got to sacrifice the masculine left side, logic side of the brain, and it's the right side of the brain that you get a lot of the mysteries from, because you connect into the all. There's a passage when Jesus has returned from the dead. They're on the Sea of Galilee, and if you look at the Sea of Galilee, there's a brain and there's a brain at the top, and then it spines out at the bottom, much like the River Nile. And Sodom and Gomorrah's at the bottom, where you'd figure it was in the bumhole region. And so Peter's in the boat, and Jesus is like, "You can catch 153 fish, but he said you got to cast your net to the right." So it's this right brain thing for me. So if you're going to sacrifice one child, it's the left brain, not the right brain. Is how I see it.
Yeah. Well, this goes back to Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Some people say the hero twins. It's a twin. Someone's got to win here. It's a binary star system. One of the suns got to win in the solar system.
Within the Eastern tradition and within modern occultism, we see this idea of the ego death, right? The killing of the conscious self in order to connect to that unconscious self, right? The part of the alchemical, a big part of the alchemical path, right, is learning to communicate and engage that unconscious mind, to quiet the conscious mind, right, to put these back into force. And then sometimes this is a ceremonial killing. It is a sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
And it is also an uplifting. It's seen as oftentimes, right, it is a sacrifice, but it is a willing sacrifice, right? We see this, for example, with the Dioscorides, Castor and Pollux. One willfully lifts up the other, so that they can ascend, right? And then the other brings up the other one, and then they both get to ascend together, but it's that one, it's like one has to stand on the other's shoulders. It's this constant theme of sacrifice, and if only one of you can achieve this, right, and the next one gets to next time, right, going through those cycles again.
Yeah,
that's right. Well, let's hit that next image. I didn't know. Maybe I got my pictures mixed up a little bit there, but I'm going to tell you something. Or go to the next image. Let me see if I got it there. All right, cool. Then I can go back to that. So go back to that image before that. I just want to bring up Jezebel real quick. Since the image is already there, it's just out of order. But we were talking about Jezebel as a type of a demon or a Lilith spirit. People talk about her. And before I showed the image of the Order of the Scarlet Cord, it showed a woman with a red cord at the top right there. But she's inviting people up. Here, the woman is being thrown off because Jezebel's thrown out of a window, and you see that red robe right there. And it says that her blood has to splatter onto the wall. It's to mark the wall with the red. It's like Passover, marking the door or marking the thing. And this is symbolic of something we call falling down the stairs, which is a symbolic literary device.
On falling down the stairs.
That's right. It is. It's a literary device that happens if you build something in a high place, then you have the shadow of that, the reverse. Something can always fall. And you'll see people falling downstairs, out of windows.
It's the Tower card within the tarot, which is representative of that Aries. But more importantly, it's that energy that catches you off guard and knocks you back to your foundation, right? Whatever that foundation is. Anything that is unstable is knocked away, right?
Yeah. And and I wanted to throw this in there because Jezebel is considered a type of Lilith, a type of Abazu, the type of these spirits. These in the Bible, these scarlet women, and sure enough, they represent it with the scarlet robe right there. As she has to have the scarlet as part of being thrown out the window. But go to the next image, and we'll keep it going because when Hezekiah, you have Isaiah. And Isaiah, there's something that happens where, and this is where Jesus talks about one of his parables. And he's there where somebody asks for food or something. Hey, can you make us a miracle? And what he says is, I have trodden the winepress alone. Oh, no. Oh, okay. This is actually a different one. This one right here from Isaiah shows the Lord in end times who will trample in the winepress, and his clothes are stained, his garments are stained with blood.
Oh, that scarlet robe.
Yeah, I wanted to show, but the scarlet robe in conjunction with the winepress.
Interesting.
And the Lord. Sorry that my slides are out of order there. But that's in Isaiah. And he talks about the Lord at the end times is like a Dionysian winepress, but stained blood, red robes. So go to the next image. And here's another Isaiah that talks about the Lord. Because we were talking about the hairy legs before of Sheba, and the fact that Abraham comes to cut Melchizedek's hair. Samson's hair is cut. Absalom has to cut his hair once a year and weigh it against the shekels, and then he dies when his hair gets cut up in the tree. I showed you that earlier. Well, it says on that day, the Lord will use a razor hired from beyond the Euphrates, the king of Assyria, to shave your head and the hair of your legs, as well as the beard. But he mentions the shaving of the legs. The Lord will shave those legs. You know? Well, that's Samson.
He wants it smooth when he comes into you.
You know, they're barbers. There's some stuff going on here. All right, so let's go to the next image.
Well, you know, those great mother priestesses, the priestesses of Isis, the priests of Isis and Cybele, they were always shaved, or they were wearing wigs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's Egyptian style.
It's a primordial, exactly. It's a primordial image from that ancient Egypt.
All right, so we left off with King Hezekiah, who rebuilt the temple, Solomon's temple. You know, here we have King Josiah, who I think is his grandson. And what is he doing right there? He's ripping his robe. Why is he ripping his robe? And this is in the Bible. King Josiah rips his robe too, because they found a lost book of Solomon, and the guy's reading it right there. While they were doing renovations of Solomon's temple, they found Solomon's lost book of the law. So King Josiah rips his robe and freaks out. And at that, they take the book, and what do? They take it to the seer, and her name is Huldah. If you go to the next image, I wonder if I got her a picture of her. Yeah, there's a picture of her right there in one of these different paintings of her. She's throwing up the symbol. You can see her throwing up the hand sign. She's holding the book that she's going to interpret for them, the lost book of Solomon that they found in the temple. And she has her nice red and white robe symbology right there on. You'll see a lot of them wearing red and white. You'll see a lot of that in all of our episodes. And in the Bible, it says that Huldah is the wife of the keeper of the wardrobe. That's her husband's title. He's the keeper of the wardrobe. He keeps the temple garments. Like we saw the guys that were walking in with the Ark of the Covenant, doing that ceremony, and they put on those clothes, where somebody keeps those. In the Bible, you have it that it's called the keeper of the wardrobe. And these are your temple garments, your vestments, your ephods, your sindons, your there's a lot of different terms for chiton, for the different outfits they wear, the aegis, the sackcloth at that. So let's go to the next image. Boom. So wow. I want to get into something, setting the stage with the temple stuff. Now, when we talked about him renovating Solomon's temple there, King Josiah and Hezekiah, and it was built by Solomon, where was it built at? And the space it was built at is already marked, and I want to get into that space. Here's David. Remember the story of David and Goliath, where he slays the giant, and Goliath in some versions is a dragon. Well, in the rest of the story, David takes that skull of the giant skull and he buries it. And he buries it on a mountain there. And that place is called Golgotha, the place of the skull. Because he buries, he buries the skull's head there. And that's the place where they say Jesus is crucified, Golgotha. Mm-hmm. And that's the place where David buys the threshing floor. Go to the next image. I think I got a.
That's
Before you move on
really
there, sorry,
interesting.
I just want to point out that Goliath is somewhat David's demon, and he's slayed in the middle of the brow.
Oh yeah, and they show you right there his pineal.
Yeah, it's pineal again. Yeah.
Right. And also, I wanted to point out, too, that this is an image that we see often in many different traditions. It immediately makes me think of the Welsh tradition in the Mabinogion, the story of Branwen, when you have her brother Bran, who is a giant, who gets decapitated, and then they carry his head on a plate and do what? They bury it under a mound that's then said to be the seat of kings. And that's where they're going to build, a magic castle, and it becomes the seat of the throne of London, apparently.
All these myths are recycled. This is all recycled myths.
Yeah. Well, like Jacob, who actually said on a stone, and then he goes up a ladder, doesn't he? To Peniel. That's where he goes to. Peniel is in Peniel.
Jacob's ladder. You got to have those ladders to fall down the stairs. Without a ladder, you can't fall down your stairs. So this place, Golgotha, where David buries the dragon's head, is the place that he also buys a threshing floor. And we talked about that in other episodes. And he goes to buy this threshing floor. And the person he buys it from is a Jebusite, the last Jebusite king at that. Because after this, that it changes the priesthood and the kingship of this area. And David, again, we're wearing red and white there. And they always show him wearing red and white. But the threshing floor is special because we get into the connotations of the Eleusinian mysteries in the threshing floor. The rituals of Demeter, the wheat rituals, all that is connecting to the threshing floor. So Solomon's temple is built on a threshing floor.
Oh, wild.
Yeah.
It's the seat of the temple where they bury the head of Goliath.
Where Christ is crucified and in part of that region. And there's more to the story with this threshing floor. I want to get into this. Because it packs in the Eleusinian and the Dionysian myths. So go to the next image. Here we'll go from Kings. This is Ezekiel, and he's doing this thing talking about the Lord. This is what I was going to talk about earlier, where they want him to do a miracle. And Jesus tells the person, if the Lord does not help you, where can I find help from you? From the threshing floor or the winepress? That's elusive. That's
and Dionysus.
Yes. And right there, that's Jesus saying, if the Lord. He's not saying if I don't have you, saying if the Lord is somebody else at that point. And that's Melchizedek. So let's go to the next image.
This is insane. He's saying, seek out the great mother and Dionysus. Go to the threshing. Like, everyone understood this. You got to understand, right? Like, there are few things within those ancient worlds that are truly communal and that stayed communal. The threshing floor, the winepress, and the hearth are the big three, right? And these are all embodied with deity. You know, the threshing floor is the place of Demeter. Hestia is the hearth. Dionysus is the wine, right?
Yeah.
And this is from the ancient tradition, because later on you don't see gods connected to things like this, you know?
Do you remember what they said when, I think it was the Romans or some similar warlike folk broke into Solomon's temple or one of the temples, and what they found in the Holy of Holies was basically a donkey.
Man riding a donkey is what it
was an image of Dionysus.
Yeah, people claim it's Dionysus, or Saturn, which is the same figure fundamentally.
Yeah. You know, and so this is the threshing floor where David buried the skull. Jesus is crucified. They buy a threshing floor, and this threshing floor is ancient. It comes from the Jebusite king. That's where it comes back to Salem, Jerusalem and Salem, and that's Melchizedek. You're forever a priest in the order of Melchizedek. And only a few people get that title to be a king priest, and it's a special lineage. Let's go to the next image. Right here, this is Genesis. And then Melchizedek, king of Salem, Jerusalem, brought out bread and wine, since he was a priest of the God Most High, Elion. Up at that top of that mountain, that threshing floor. The threshing floor was up on the top of the mountain where you're not supposed to go up and worship. Melchizedek, when Abraham shows up, he brings him bread and wine. That's threshing floor and wine press. That
Wow.
Melchizedek had. It's built up Melchizedek. This is based on Melchizedek. Bread and wine. He's offering him the Eleusinian, the Eleusinian, and the Dionysian mysteries. And Abraham gives him a tenth of his wealth after that. And that's a Levitical type, 10%. That's the ark. It deals with this certain class of people. And what's also ironic, that same threshing floor area where David buried the head and Jesus is crucified and Solomon's temple is built, is where Abraham strikes his covenant with the burning pot.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yes. Go to the next image. Maybe I got a representation of that. Yeah, this is off of the internet. And this is when Abraham goes up on that mountain right there, and the pot is burning. There's animals on each side, and there's a smoking pot. And that's how he makes the covenant.
He was doing what? Smoking pot?
Yes, right. He might as well been. I think it was sulfur. They might have smelled some sulfur at that, because we'll get into that a little later. But yeah, this is Abraham after being offered bread and wine from Melchizedek, the wine press and threshing floor. He goes up on that same mountain where Solomon builds a temple and has a covenant with the burning pot, a genie's pot. You know, see, smoking pots that have power, the genie's pot. Let's go, and bottling demons in high places at that. Go to the next image. Yeah, right. So I just got two more pictures and I'll round this out real quick. The hoopoe bird, which we know is used by Solomon. Here's someone holding one, because in ancient Egypt, if you see it in the hieroglyphs or stele, if you're holding a hoopoe bird as a kid, it means you're going to be the future king. Hoopoes spread out when they're relaxed or when they're in defensive mode. But the hoopoe bird has a couple other interesting properties. Besides being the national bird of Israel, even though it's not kosher to eat, this bird has a couple special properties. It can detect water underground. It can detect an electrical storm. It can detect earthquakes through piezoelectrical signals and vamoose. It'll leave the area because it knows what's going to happen. And besides that, it has something, and you know what's all right. So here's what's ironic. When an electrical storm happens with lightning, lightning gives off the smell of sulfur dioxide. Now, guess what? Now these birds are special. Hoopoes, they give off something that's called dimethyl sulfide. We talked about how doves can secrete dove's milk. Well, hoopoes also have a special secretion as well. Doesn't mean they chew food and spit it back to the baby's mouth. Underneath their feathers, they secrete something that's sulfur dioxide, which is like the smell of rotting meat. And they coat their feathers in it, and they coat their babies in it and the eggshells with it, because it has antimicrobial properties. The sulfur-based thing that smells like sulfur, mind you. And you know, there's this thing with demons and sulfur, because when demons are around, you smell sulfur, or you repel demons with sulfur. And what's even curiouser still, DMSO. You've heard of DMSO. DMSO can be made. DMSO. Dimethyl sulfoxide, dimethyl sulfoxide, which is different than dimethyl sulfide, which is different than sulfur oxide. DMSO is used with mental patients, bipolar disorder. So you can take the secretion of the hoopoe bird and mix it with salt water, and what that does, it does a microbial oxidation of it and turns it into DMSO. Which is a very powerful formula, which is a psychoactive at that, or it's a carrier. It can go through your subcutaneous, transdermal, goes through the skin. It can take another psychoactive and bond with it and take it to your skin. You know, and go to the next image, the last image, and we'll talk about.
Sorry, let's not downplay that. I think you've actually cracked something there, Dion. I think that's very, very important.
Well, you can collect the secretion off them. And use it. You could collect the secretion off the hoopoe bird and transform it into a property that affects your mind.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's wild stuff, right? And I remind people, when we were looking at some of these hoopoe legends from the previous episodes, we were looking at the Greek magical papyri as well as Egyptian magical papyri, and the hoopoe is used in these eye salves to induce
exactly.
right? It's a very common ingredient in many different things. It was also used within the midwifery, but it is the one that stood out to us was that it was used specifically as an eye salve to induce visionary experience, which is just wild.
Well, yes, its secretion converts to a sulfur base that can get with salt water converts into DMSO, which can do things on its own or act as a carrier for other properties. Now go to the next image, the last image I got, and it deals with the relationship with sulfur, salt, and mercury. And we said this is the third temple, the third episode, the third degree of the Order of the Scarlet Cord. It deals with sulfur, red sulfur at that. It's part of the phase of purifying. And this is spiritual alchemy. This is real alchemy. It works hand in hand. How we go through different phases of transformation or purification. And sulfur is the backbone of, alchemy. That's what you learn. They're going to teach you that, and it expels demons, or you can smell it when demons are around. And I think that's what's in those burning pots. It deals with sulfur as well.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah. On that.
That was wild, Dion. Lots of fun.
It mustn't be pleasant to be around there. Sulfur's that eggy, horrible, farty smell that they associated with the rims of volcanoes and demons because it stinks. But also, funnily enough,
it's called brimstone.
Brimstone, fire and brimstone. But
the power
also,
to control demons.
These places are associated with gods as well. Like Yahweh was probably a volcano god, because that's where you find metals too, because obviously these ores are being spewed up by the earth itself. Very interesting, that.
The lost mines of Solomon.
Yeah.
The metals. And they found some mines there in Israel. They have a big sulfur mine that they found that they were using in ancient times, because it can be used. All these elements. Just in modern times, we don't understand what they did back in nature, back in the ancient times.
That methylating process is a biological one, though, as I understand it. So things like that aren't going to be produced by nature, but the birds certainly. I found that brilliant, fantastic. Round of applause.
Lots of fun, Dion. Great stuff.
Wait a minute, we got one more thing to say about the hoopoe bird, though. Don't be snappy. You can actually take aim with it. So you're going to get into that.
The question is whose presentation do we want to do next? We can do mine, and we'll get to some hoopoe. My presentation, I'm specifically going to be diving into the Shamir worm in the Talmud, and we're going to be going deep. Some people have already been commenting in the texts about the myths, and I'm kind of biting my tongue because they know what's coming.
Then you should, because I'm dealing with the Lesser Key of Solomon, so mine's quite late. It's 1700s by that point.
So, we can do mine. We'll start with mine then. It continues well from Dion's here, because we're still dealing with sort of core traditional texts, right? So we already talked about
chat for 2 seconds while I go and get myself a drink. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. I'll remind everyone, we already discussed this, but this was a really interesting image I found that was apparently, this is a replica that was created by some rabbis based on their mystical understanding of the Torah and utilizing the passages that describe how the building is supposed to be, the Great Temple. And it's housed within the Museum of Jerusalem. And I just found it to be a really beautiful piece that was representative of the sacred temple that Solomon is building. And today we're going to be diving, though, into one specific idea related to the temple, and that is the shamir and what the shamir is. And here we have a medieval iteration of it, which is showing the shamir as a worm. Now, this is a very controversial idea and something that occurs later, but it is still a part of the authentic tradition. When I went looking for the earliest reference to the shamir specifically as a worm, what I found was the French rabbi and mystic Rashi, Rabbi Ben Yitzhaki. And he talks about in his Midrash about how it's a living being. It's not even, it's kind of referred to as a seed. We'll get into it. It gets really weird looking at what this shamir is. And there is a lot of debate, even up until this day, within the Jewish community about what they mean by that shamir. So I wanted to show the earliest reference that I could find in the Bible to this word shamir occurs in Ezekiel. And a lot of us in the Western world, we miss it because they don't translate it as shamir in English, right? It's translated differently. So here's Ezekiel 3:9 in English. As an adamant, harder than flint, I have made thy forehead. Fear them not, neither be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. And what they're saying is this is a metaphor, and they're saying that they've made their heads harder, like adamant, like really intensely hard, harder than flint. But flint isn't the word, it's shamir. So if we go here, this is from the Orthodox Jewish Bible. And this one is actually using it's a combination of English and Hebrew to try and maintain a lot of those Hebrew metaphors and analogies and so on. So as a shamir, adamant, hardest stone, more shazak. This word shazak, it doesn't mean stronger than flint. It means spiritually more powerful than flint. Okay? And usually this is a word that's related to a power of God. Right? I have made thy metzak forehead. Fear them not, neither be terrified at their looks, though they be a Bas Marie, a house of rebellion. So this is the earliest iteration of that word, the shamir. And it's this idea, it's something that cannot be broken. It's something that's impossible to break. And it is akin to stone, though not a stone.
Don't they still use the word shamir in Hebrew to mean something like emery? You know, like powdered, like emery boards, and then you powder the stone, and you can work stone. It's obviously not really meaning that, but
well, this is where it gets, because there is one school of thought, even within the Jewish tradition, that believes that this would be an emery stone. And there's even, if you look into the etymology of that word shamir, it seems to be related to the similar Greek word that refers to emery. And this I did find in the literature. So there is all that tradition, and there is part of the tradition that calls it a green stone, right? And there's all this weirdness, and you get into wild conspiracy. Like, okay, so you got a green stone that has to be wrapped in wool and then put inside a lead box because it'll eat and destroy everything. So some modern people believe it's uranium or some kind of radioactive material. It gets all into this weirdness, right? So
usually green, when referring to stones, green means living.
Yeah.
Usually.
Interesting. But yeah, so we're going to go to Jeremiah 17:1. This is again from the Orthodox Jewish Bible so that we can see the more Hebraic terminology here. And it says, the Shadat Yehuda is written with an et barzel, an iron pen, and with its zipporin shamir, point of a diamond. But again, it's the shamir. On the point of the pen is the shamir. It is engraved upon the tablet of their lev, upon the karanat, the horns of your mitzbayot, your altars. Now, what's wild about this is they're carving these things into your altar using the shamir as a writing utensil, right? So kind of wild stuff, I thought.
Very.
And again, we're getting to this magic of writing the word and composing the written word. Now I wanted to get into the Babylonian Talmud, and we're going to be jumping around to a bunch of different sections of it. But so we're going to start here. It says, the Mishnah taught, from the time when the first temple was destroyed, the shamir ceased to exist. So they said after the destruction of the temple, the shamir was occulted. It disappeared. No one knows. It ceased to exist. Okay. The sages taught this shamir is the creature. See, this is where we see it from the Midrash in the Babylonian Talmud, is the creature with which Solomon built the temple, as it is stated, for the house when it was built of whole stone from the quarry, which is Kings 6:7. Now these words should be understood exactly as they are written, that King Solomon took whole stones and shaped them by having the shamir do the cutting. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda, right? So in the most orthodox version of this, they believe that, the stones are being cut by a tiny creature, right? That disappeared after the temple was destroyed.
Oy vey.
You're shaking your head. You're shaking your head. But yeah, this is an authentic tradition, right? An authentic tradition. So let's keep digging into this Talmud because it gets interesting. All right. The Baraita continues. Rather, one writes the letters on them in ink and shows them, i.e., he places the shamir close to the ink markings from outside without having it touch the stones, and they split open along the lines of the ink of their own accord, like this fig that splits in the summer without losing any of its mass, and like this field in a valley that cracks in the rainy season without losing anything of its mass. The shamir was used in this way for engravings. So they were drawing an image and then they're placing the shamir along what they drawn, and the shamir's eating it or cracking it, causing it to split along those lines. Kind of wild. The sages taught the shamir, its size is that of a barley corn. This gets into your stuff, Ryan, with the pineal gland, and this idea that the shamir could be the pineal gland. And it was created in the 6 days of creation. So this is in the earliest form of creation. It's created right at the beginning of time. And nothing hard can withstand it. In what is it kept so that it will not break everything in the vicinity? They wrap it in tufts of wool and place it in a leaden vessel full of barley bran, which is soft and will not be broken by the shamir. So they have to keep it within a lead box, The temple.
Can I just interject there quickly, just because it came to mind? There's a woolly, in inverted commas, substance around the brain called the pia mater, the great mother. Like there's like a webby husk, because wool, when you pull it out, it's web-like, isn't it? So there's a woolly husk around your brain.
I keep thinking this idea too. We have this magical thing that is used for writing, and then we got magic wool that it is wrapped in. What do we know that is a magic piece of wool that has writing on it? This takes us back to the golden fleece, right?
Oh yeah.
There's some weirdness going on here, and in the earliest iterations, it's not fleece. It's human skin, tattooed flail human skin. Yes, the golden fleece is human skin.
Well, I was thinking before when Dion kept bringing up the goat skin and the ages, and we were, because we've been talking about the red cord and the red robes as well, that perhaps these things, including the goat skin, are slow delivery systems for drug addicts. Through the skin, and it comes through slowly, and it's just a thought.
Well, there's something going on with this skin image too, because we see it in the New Testament in the Apocrypha with the character of Thomas, who is flayed, right? St. Thomas is flayed. We talked about this, Dion, right? And it gets so wild. And Ammon goes on a tangent about this too, right? So
Ammon always goes on a tangent.
Yeah, there's something wild though about this, the taking of the skin and the writing upon the skin. And the using, anyway, it's maybe a bit of a stretch, but I just thought it was an interesting aside.
Yeah,
anyway, let's continue here. For what purpose did the shamir come? The Gemara answers, it was necessary for that which is taught in the Baraita. These stones in the breastplate and ephod upon which were inscribed the names of the tribes, they may not be written on with ink, because it is stated like the engravings of a signet, okay? Which means the names must be engraved onto the stones, and they may not be scratched on with a scalpel, because it is stated in their full settings, indicating that the stones must be complete and not missing any of their mass, right? So you couldn't have taken anything from the stone. The stone must be shaped to have those letters, and the only way to do that would be with the shamir worm. And they're arguing that the whole point the shamir worm came was to create the magical breastplate of the Aaron priesthood, right? So they continue here. The Gemara answers, as it is written with regard to the building of the temple, for the house when it was being built was built of stone made ready at the quarry, and there was neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron heard in the house while it was being built. Solomon said to the sages, how shall I make it so the stone will be precisely cut without using iron? They said to him, there is a creature called a shamir that can cut the stones, which Moses brought and used to cut the stones of the ephod, the breastplate. And here's a recreation again from the Museum of Jerusalem of what the magical breastplate would have looked like. And we saw those Masonic Templars had a recreation of this as well. And when they were doing their rites that Dion was showing us with the Order of the Sacred Cord, you know? So, and again, this connects us to that imagery of these magical phylacteries that we've been talking about for so long, creating these magical forms of armor to protect oneself from demons and other spiritual entities, right? Really interesting.
If you remember, Belloc wears one, Indiana Jones's foe wears one in the Temple of Doom when he opens up the Ark of the Covenant before he goes, melts. That cool bit. Sorry.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Right? So here is our magical phylactery, our golden armor for the priests of Aaron, right? So then I wanted to show you the passage in Exodus where they talk about what Moses needs to do here, right? Then take two lazuli stones and engrave on them the names of the sons of Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, and the names of the remaining 6 on the other stone, in the order of their birth. On the 2 stones you shall make seal engravings, the work of a lapidary, of the names of the sons of Israel. And if you make for me an altar of stones, do not build it of hewn stone, for by wielding your tool upon them you have profaned them. So again, you have to use this magic of the shamir, all right? Otherwise, these stones have been profaned. This was another interesting thing in one of the sections of the Babylonian Talmud. They had earlier referenced that it was one of these things that were said to have been at the 6th day of creation, right? And this is a very special thing, that there are these primordial magical things. So it's one of the 10 things. 10 things were created on the eve of the first Shabbat at twilight, right? And these are they: the mouth of the earth that swallowed Korach, the mouth of the well that followed the Israelites in the desert, the mouth of the ass of Bilam, the donkey of Bilam is one of these primordial things.
Well, you know what happened with Balaam? He used to sexually torture the donkey at night.
I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. And God got mad at him and sent the angel to spite him and said, hey, stop doing that to the donkey. No, it says in the Bible he would do things to the donkey at night, and that would give him the power of prophecy. And the donkey even tells him, don't I do everything that you want?
That donkey's magic of speech was created on the 6th day, on the eve of the first Shabbat. Like, there's something wild going on with that donkey magic. You know?
Didn't you just say the shamir worm was made on the 6th day?
It is. I'm about to get to it here. If you go, the rainbow, the manna, which is that magical incense, Aaron's staff, number 7. I also wanted to show you which number it was. The 7th thing on the 6th day is the shamir worm. And what comes after the creation of the shamir worm? Writing. What is the shamir worm used to do? As a tool of writing. And then comes the inscription of the 10 commandments, and then the tablets themselves.
And what are the tablets? Are they tablets? Or are they dreidels?
Right. Are they spinning top?
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
They're engraved gemstones.
How could you have the inscription and then the tablets? That seems weird to me.
Right?
It's backwards.
I know, but this is what's written. The inscription on the tablets of the 10 commandments, the tablets themselves. But this is what's all been created on that 6th day, right? I think what's important is that they're saying that the word, the rules themselves exist independently of the tablets themselves, right? And that's the important magical thing there. But I just thought it was wild. The Shamir is the 7th, right? With the most potential power, right? And it comes right before the invention of writing. And we see that it's used for engraving and writing. There's something weird going on here. It's pretty interesting. So let's continue diving deeper into our Talmud. We're now going to get into some of these. There's some really interesting myths and stories that talk about that Ashmedai demon and Solomon. And then I wanted to highlight one that was really cool here. So it says, Solomon said to them, "Where is it found?" The Shamir. They said to him, "Bring a male demon and a female demon and torment them together. It is possible that they know where, and due to the suffering, they will reveal the place to you." Solomon brought a male demon and a female demon and tormented them together. And they said, "We do not know where to find the Shamir. Perhaps Ashmedai, king of the demons, knows," right? Or his potential twin, right?
Yeah.
It's a potential brother, I should say.
It could be a brother, it could be a son, it could be a father. There's all kinds of, depends on which book you read.
Right?
Solomon you can't help but hear Asherah in that as well, who was like the feminine aspect of God as well. And
right?
The trees
absolutely in the pole. Your pole god again. Your pole god there, Ryan. That great
I'm going to bring it back to the pole god by the end, believe me.
Well, that's why they destroyed the second temple, is because they built an Asherah pole.
Wow. Is that right?
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Let's continue.
Wasn't the second temple real?
They renovated. King Uzziah, Hezekiah and Josiah. They renovated, brought it back.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the first temple is clearly not real, but I think that I remember the second one being real. Sorry, Snappy.
Yeah, the second one was the most wealthy temple in the Greco-Roman world, in the Mediterranean world at its time.
Right? It was sacked, sacked by Egypt and also by Nebuchadnezzar, I think.
Yeah, and it was beyond influential, right? It was inspiring the entire region at this time. One of the big things that a lot of people gloss over is that Yahwism, right? This non-ethnically based iteration of Jewish thought that was spreading around the Mediterranean at the time of the rise of Christianity, and was competing with Christianity early in. And then it kind of becomes usurped and integrated. You know, you get all these different cults that are around at this time, and it's a wild experimental age. You know, syncretism is everywhere.
Yeah.
But, let's continue here. Solomon said to them, "Where is Ashmedai?" They said to him, "He is on such and such a mountain. He has dug a pit for himself there and filled it with water and covered it with a rock and sealed it with the seal. He made himself a pot. He made himself a genie bottle," right?
On top of the mountain.
On top of the mountain. "And every day he ascends to heaven and studies in the heavenly study hall, and he descends to the earth and studies in the earthly study hall." So he comes and goes, and he's able to do so because he has that home. He has that cave with water that he can go into, right? "And he comes and checks his seal to ensure that nobody has entered his pit. And then he uncovers it and drinks from the water in the pit. And then he covers it and seals it again and goes. He needs special water for some reason. Solomon sent for Benayahu, son of Jehoiada, a member of the royal entourage, and gave him a chain onto which a sacred name of God was carved, and a ring onto which a sacred name of God was carved, and fleeces of wool, and wine skins of wine.
That's your scarlet cord.
Right? What did Benayahu do? He went and dug a pit lower down to the mountain, below the pit dug by Ashmedai. He drained the water and plugged with the fleeces of wool so that Ashmedai's pit was emptied. And he dug a pit higher up the mountain above Ashmedai's pit. And he poured the wine into it so that the wine filled Ashmedai's pit. And he plugged the lower and the upper pits that he dug. He climbed up and he sat in a tree. So he's effectively drained all the water out of Ashmedai's pit and replaced it with wine. And now he's off to a tree to watch what happens. When Ashmedai came, he checked his seal, opened the pit, and found it to be filled with wine. He said that it is written, wine is a mocker, strong drink is riotous, and whosoever wallows in it is not wise. And it is written, harlotry, wine, and new wine take away the heart. He concluded, I will not drink this wine. Eventually, when he became thirsty, he was unable to resist the wine, and he drank. He became intoxicated and fell asleep. Benayahu descended from the tree, came and threw the train around Ashmedai and enclosed him within it. When Ashmedai awoke, he struggled to remove the chain. Benayahu said to him, the name of your master is upon you. The name of your master is upon you. Do not tear the chain. God's name is written on this chain, and it is forbidden to destroy it.
When Ashmedai, make a quick comment. Sorry.
Of course.
Ashmedai, when you read into him, he's a gentleman. It seems he's like erudite and quite a balanced character, and doesn't seem very demonic at all in his personality. Strangely, even when Solomon's captured him, he's still quite a nice guy.
It's kind of interesting. Why is he this primordial villain? Though, yeah, Beelzebub and Ashmedai are the two demons that Solomon seems to fight and deal with the most. You know, they're the reoccurring ones. And I wonder, and I think it does have to do with that Asherah. The etymology seems too similar.
Yeah.
Right? When Ashmedai arrived there in Jerusalem, they did not bring him before Solomon until 3 days had passed. On the first day, he said to them, why doesn't the king want me to come to him? They said to him, he drank too much and was overcome by drink. Ashmedai took a brick and placed it on top of another brick. The servants came and told Solomon what he had done. Solomon interpreted the action and said to them, this is what he said to you through this illusion. Return and give the king more to drink. Now I believe this is about teaching people, these next three, how to understand the signs and synchronicities in the interworking of demons. You know, if they're moving these bricks around, then you can tell, and Solomon knows how to read the signs. It's telling me that I'm drinking too much, right? And what are these demons? They are our embodied selves. When did the demons rise up and make a stink? When we're drinking too much, you know? So the following day, Ashmedai said to them, why doesn't the king want me to come to him? They said to him, he ate too much and was overcome by food. Ashmedai took the brick off the other brick and placed it on the ground. The servants came and told Solomon what Ashmedai had done. And he interpreted Ashmedai's actions and said to them, this is what he said to you through the illusion. Take his food away from him. At the end of 3 days, Ashmedai came before Solomon. Ashmedai took a reed and measured 4 cubits and threw it before him. He said to Solomon, see, when that man Solomon dies, he will have nothing in this world except the 4 cubits of his grave. Now you have conquered the entire world, and yet you are not satisfied until you also conquer me. And there's an illusion here. You can't conquer the whole world until you conquer the demon. And that in order to conquer the whole world, you must command your demons. Solomon said to him, I need nothing from you. I want to build the temple, and I need the shamir for this. Ashmedai said to him, the shamir was not given to me, but it was given to the angelic minister of the sea. And he gives it only to the wild rooster, which, when I looked in the rabbinic commentary, is the hoopoe. Right? The hoopoe. In the Jewish and the Islamic tradition is the one who holds the shamir, who has this, is deeply connected to Solomon in his magic. Also known as the dukifat, or the hoopoe, whom he trusts by the force of his oaths to return it. And what does the wild rooster do with it? He brings it to the mountains that are not fit for habitation, and he places the shamir on the craggy rock, and the mountain splits. And he takes and he brings seeds of the trees, throws them there, and it becomes fit for habitation. He destroys mountains and he makes homes. And it's interesting, if you look at where the hoopoe lives, it often lives in the cracks along mountains. And it will go into these cracks and it will befoul them with all of its secretions and make this protective barrier, this cave in which it can protect its young from the outside world. And they're claiming that it's able to do this through the power of the shamir, which is like a seed that it places upon the mountain and it splits the mountain. They investigated and found the nest of a wild rooster in which there were chicks, and he covered its nest with translucent glass. When the rooster came, it wanted to enter the nest but was unable to do so because it couldn't get through the glass, right? It was tricked. It went and brought the shamir and placed it on the glass, right? To crack it. Solomon's servant threw a clump of dirt at the rooster, and the rooster knocked over the shamir. The man took it, and the wild rooster went and strangled itself over the fact that it had not kept its oath by not returning the shamir. So the hoopoe commits suicide in this story in order for
Very depressive bird is a hoopoe.
Yeah, well, right? Pretty crazy, though. Solomon kept Ashmedai with him until he completed the building of the temple. One day, he stood with Ashmedai alone. He said to Ashmedai, "It is written, for him like the lofty horns of the wild ox." And the sages say, in explanation of the verse, like the lofty horns, these are the ministering angels. The wild ox, these are the demons. In what way are you greater than us? Why does the verse praise your abilities and powers over those of human beings? Ashmedai said to him, "Take the chain engraved with God's name off me and give me your ring." So this is a similar theme we've seen in other stories. Dion has talked about a couple of versions of this where Solomon gives up his ring, often either to a woman or to demons, but people ask him and he gives away his power consistently. So take off and give me your ring with God's name engraved on it, and I will show you my strength. Solomon took the chains off him and he gave him his ring. Ashmedai swallowed the ring and grew until he placed one wing in the heaven and one wing on the earth. He threw Solomon a distance of 400 parasangs. With regard to that moment, Solomon said, "What profit is there for a person through all of his toil under the sun?" With Solomon disposed from the throne, Ashmedai took his place. Ashmedai ascends to the throne and impersonates Solomon and becomes the Solomonic king by utilizing his seal and his robes.
He has a right to, because he's the son of David.
Right?
He's his brother. He's the heir to the throne.
Isn't that interesting, though? Freaking wild. I didn't even realize this son of David thing. That isn't in the Talmud. At least not in this.
In the Zohar. In the Zohar, right? David hooks up with Argot, who's a snake-headed woman who produces Ashmedai. So he has claims to the throne.
We'll have to dig deeper into the Zohar.
I will also say, if Ashmedai's in this case is his demons, it sounds like he's in addiction. Basically, he's become addicted, and like Solomon, you meet drunks and they've gone. There's this other guy that's there. It's Jekyll and Hyde, isn't it? It's that kind of an idea.
Well, look, we see the demon calling him out. Why is Solomon engaging in all this food? Why is Solomon engaging in all this wine? He's addicted, right? Why are you trying to conquer me when you've conquered the earth? Because he's not satisfied. So that demon is able to place and take over him because Solomon is bound by greed at this time. He's not satisfied with all of his great achievements, and he's only out to oppress Ashmedai for the sake of oppressing him. It's not even about balancing himself. It's about power, which will corrupt always, right? Let's continue here. Okay. Oh, yeah, that was it. Sorry. So that was the last bit of the Talmud. They don't get into any more of that story directly in the Talmud. You have to go into the folklore and whatnot. But interesting stuff with Solomon and this demonic in this magic of the shamir, which seems to be this seed or a creature that is utilized as a writing implement in order to carve seals in stone. And it's like, in order to write. And I think it's supposed to be, in my mind, I think it's more in line with what you were saying, Ryan. I think you're still on the right track. But I think because of the connection to writing, that this has to do with the faculty of reason. Writing,
yes,
and the ability to write and remember was always seen as like this high science, as that standing in for that faculty of reason in science. Hermes is the god of reason. He's reason embodied, right?
well,
And when we go to
actually,
that logos, it literally means to take an account, to reason in its earliest iteration. It's not the word, it's reasoning, right?
It's accounting, isn't it? Literally,
Yeah.
Well, that's why he wrote the words before the tablets, because it comes before.
Yeah.
Right? He wrote the words first.
He's got it. I was going to say as well, that actually feeds it. Have you finished your presentation, Snappy? Because that feeds beautifully into what I've got to do.
Beautiful.
Which is, what happens by the 1700s and what happens when, the Rosicrucians get hold of it, basically, and similar
I'm throwing up the 3 6s there. I saw that, Ryan.
A-okay, right? All right, so let's bring this up. Okay. Whoa, we got ourselves some Solomonic seals.
Yes. So, for everybody out there, you've seen the Solomonic magic portrayed a billion times in films. Whenever you see somebody with a circle, stars, or hexagrams, or whatever it'll be, pentagrams, hexagrams, and the salt and the candle. This is Solomonic magic, as it's been passed down to us. And again, it's been demonized. And I remember I was in the very early days of me studying this kind of stuff. I've met the only ceremonial magician I've ever met, who was actually part of a cult. I don't know what to call it. I think he was in the AA or something like that. Not Alcoholics Anonymous. What is it?
Aleister Crowley's magical order there. The Argentum or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just saying to it, I hadn't looked into it much, but I just said, look, whenever I see this demon stuff, aside from a few Catholic hangovers when I first started looking at it, and it gave me like, I'm not sure if I should be looking at this. Is this something that I want to go into? I always said it was like a wheel of psychology, like the zodiac is in fact a wheel of psychology. And he said, yeah. He said, yeah, that's what it is. And so when I looked into this stuff, it was all like, this similar with the name of God, the Shem Ham Farash, the 72 names for God. Well, there are 72 demons in this Goetia. Goetia means something like, is it wailing or something like? I think it means screaming or wailing or something like that. I don't quite understand the
it deals with the wailing, it deals with the wailing, and this is a primordial theme that we see with a lot of this black demonic magic, right? You see this, for example, in the Dionysian tradition with Bacchus and Bromios, or Bromius and Bromio. Hecate is the wailer, Dionysus is the wailer. We see this in the Vedic tradition with that god Rudra, the howler, who upsets the sacrifice, and you have to protect the sacrifice from that howling force of the wind, so and that's connected to Shiva as well. It's connected to Shiva in the later traditions as well. So it's a very interesting idea. This howling force of demonic energy is kind of something we see in many, many different traditions.
Isn't there a sense of desperation there as well?
Absolutely. It makes me think in the Great Mother traditions, right? We have this mourning and the grief and as this sacred act, right? In the Eleusinian mystery, it is that cry of the Great Mother that causes the dead to rise. And it is the embracing and the engaging of that wailing that is so primordial, right? And they talk about also, when we look at the magic of Hecate and Aphrodite, we see, for example, the wryneck bird, right? The spinning top, that love magic where you are calling the yunks, that bird that wails and screams in pain. And this yunks, the bird, is a demon that is bound and commanded in order to force someone to fall in love with another. And this is what Jason does to Medea, right? Through the power of Circe and Aphrodite, he's able to command that Jinx, the Yonks, the Wryneck to curse, right?
The Hoopoe is also
Like
seen as
scream.
something of a demon as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's
very
not looks
similar.
well.
It's right. The birds are always these angelic demonic forces, or these priest or priestess forces, right? Anytime you see the birds, there's that kind of illusion going on. Is this an angel? Is this a priest? You got to keep that in the back of your mind, right?
Well, if I could say
What were you
one
gonna
thing
say,
real
Neil?
quick, Lilith, it means screech owl.
Right.
Wow.
The Lilitu.
Yeah, the Lilith, the screech owl. That's what Lilith is. Solomon's wife, Adam's wife, Samuel's wife.
Right. So again,
So
we're getting to that howling too, the death wail in the night that scares us.
so this is a grimoire, which is a word that comes from grammar. Now you get grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which are the original processes developed. Grammar would be getting all your information together. Logic is sorting through that information to see what's true and false. Rhetoric is the wisdom that you get at the end. And this is a grimoire. So again, it's I see this as being psychology and understanding yourself, understanding the separate parts of yourself which can be positively charged or negatively charged, i.e. the demons. Is it an angel or is it a demon? And they're the angles, aren't they? Angels, messengers, angles, they're all the same root words. So we're getting this wheel and then the different angles on it, and those are the different parts of your psyche, just like the zodiac. We can see here that not only have we got this serpent, which is this Saturnian serpent of the life force that encloses things, because obviously we're trying to capture demons. Remember, this is all, a bit of a joke. It's a bit of a nudge, wink, wink all the time. We're dealing with magicians here, the tricksters. This stuff's encoded. So we've got this, much like with what are they called, the Egyptian, when you get a little lozenge, I forgot what they're called.
Well, it's a big thing in the Egyptian magic. You have that searching. You form the circle to find Osiris, right? In order to get all the body parts and to reassemble the whole. The drawing of the circle is the reassembling of the whole, and the creating of that womb to give birth to form, to summon that Harpocrates, that child to come, right? Horus the child.
It's making a set. It's if you're surrounding something with the life force, you're making a life in there. You're making something. You're making a set of something. Obviously, Set, Saturn, these are all similar deities. And if you notice, and you know this from popular culture, it's all done with geometry.
Yeah.
It's always geometry. Now, there are special properties to these hexagrams and pentagons, and that is based by the angles, what happens when you put them in a circle. They'll hit certain degrees along, the pentagram hits certain degrees in that 360-degree circle. And those tend to be these harmonic numbers that I'm always chirping about. Same with the hexagon. And it also takes into account that, so they have different functions. That hexagram, the David star that you can see there, the seal of Solomon star, has the properties of, it's best to think about something like a honeycomb in a beehive. It's actually got this storage capacity to it. It's in a circle. If you're going to have straight line, a circle's one of the best ways of, if you're going to compress from above, a circle will take all that energy and put it around equidistantly. Now, if you take a hexagon, that does something similar, but with the ability to also have straight lines in there. And that's as close as you're going to get to a perfect distribution of force. Bees use it to store honey as well, and to keep a good structure within that hive. It has a literal function in nature. So that shape is actually used by these, for these ideas of summoning demons to contain the demon. Whereas the pentagram is used to bring it to the fore. You might even create a spirit within that pentagram, We know that pentagram's all golden ratio, the ratio of life. Again, this has been known for a very long time. The Pythagoreans used it as a symbol of their knowledge and belonging to that tradition. So you'll see, is it Polk Runyon, a famous ceremony, a known
Wow, yeah,
ceremonial
a known weirdo. Yes,
Yeah.
one of us. Yes,
Yeah.
you know.
So he's
an interesting guy. Yeah.
fully invested in all this stuff, and I agree that you should be doing that sacrifice of the twins, getting rid of the left side of the brain, going into the right, avoiding the logic and all that stuff, and going into kind of this dream state. And he was like, "Oh, I figured out all this stuff about this. The reason why this ceremonial magic doesn't work. We need a mirror." So
Yeah,
there's
his Black Mirror all over YouTube. That was a
Black
big
Mirror.
deal like 10 years ago.
Yeah, he's like those rabbis, those Orthodox rabbis that just believe in everything at face value. Oh, I found this mystical thing. Blah, 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 blah. No,
Well,
Paul, you've not.
it's really easy when I found the secret that no one else found, and you got to come to me, and it's through this thing that I can teach you. Oh, of course, right?
And we're offering a discount if you get it this week.
It's so true, though, isn't it? Yeah. And he can't do it. He's got his friend to do it instead. But anyway, so yeah, these are the basic precepts of what I see was going on here from the actual fact that they believed you could conjure demons into this, but because they don't really understand that they're too stupid to understand. So if we go to the next image, please.
Oh, sorry. Wait, there we go.
Right, okay. I'm going to look over here because we've got a bit of reading to do. So this is actually a foreword. I didn't check out who'd written it, but it had lots of mentions of A.E. Waite in there, who did the Rider-Waite Tarot deck and was a member of several of these occult societies. And
Underrated.
we note at the end.
Yeah, I was just going to say with A.E. Waite, probably one of the most underrated occultists of modern times. A lot of people didn't like him because he was very Christian, and there was a radical kind of, at that point, kind of breaking with Christian tradition. But A.E. Waite, he composed the Rider-Waite Tarot deck with Pamela Coleman Smith, the most popular tarot deck, and he translated Alpheus Levi's A History of Magic into English, which is still the only translation that there is of it. And it's like, that dude is one of the most influential occultists of all time and doesn't get nearly enough credit. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, something he also did that was weird.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Oh, I was going to say
again,
he also used to work for a milk company, Malted Milk. And he put out a magazine that combined the milk company sales products with occult stuff. And he understood the occultic properties of milk. This is at the turn of the century. That's where he made the money to do the tarot stuff, was from his milk company, Malted Milk.
It's the MLK, isn't it? It's the Melchizedek.
Yes, right.
Yeah, the top, the crown at the top. Yeah, there's lots in milk and the kingly stuff. And if you look right at the end of this little passage that I'm about to read, where was it composed?
Oh, Boleskine House. That's Crowley's old pad.
at the shores of Loch Ness, no less.
Oh gosh.
Where he famously didn't finish the Abramelin ritual.
Yeah, he gave up.
Summon his holy guardian angel. Right. So, and there's a film about that called Song of Solomon. Is that right? Did you see that one?
I haven't seen. I'm not a big film person. I got too much of my head buried in books. But that sounds like a cool
you're better
one.
that way. Yeah, we need you, Snappy. You're the only reader amongst us. Although I'm about to read this now. So yes. I've cut. This is actually page 12, page 13, condensed, because there's little mentions of A.E. Waite in there and stuff like that. So this was written by N.B. Foyers. I don't know who that is, but clearly a member of the Golden Dawn or similar. And this is me saying that it's psychology, and we've been saying the whole time it's psychology, and this is about the Lesser Key of Solomon, which was originally written in the 1700s, and this essentially was written. This part we're going to read is early 20th century, late 1900s, something like that. The seals, therefore, represent Mr. Spencer's projected cube, which is a Saturnian thing. Their seals, therefore, represent methods of stimulating or regulating those particular spots through the eye. The name of God are vibrations calculated to establish a general control of the brain. So they're talking about intonations somewhat. They're talking about these magical techniques that are repeated throughout the book. So general control of the brain, control of the brain in detail. So he's talking about large, big, the kings of demons, the various generals and whatnot, and then the demons that are under their control. So general control of the brain in detail, control of one special portion, name of the spirit. Unfortunately, we cannot stop there. Solomon promises us that we can obtain information, destroy our enemies, understand the voices of nature, obtain treasure, heal diseases, etc. And then I think I've cut this bit out. So these 5 powers at random, considerations of space for me to bid to explain all. It brings up facts from the subconscious. Number 2, we come to an interesting fact. It is curious to note that the contrast between the noble means and the apparently vile ends of magical rituals, the latter are disguises for the sublime truths. Exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to de-occult this stuff. And one of the best occultations to stop people looking at this stuff is what I call the Scooby-Doo trick, which is, we dress up in ghost clothes because we're hiding a gold mine. Jinkies.
Yeah, right. You make it all weird and obscure. You hide it behind ridiculous magic,
scary things.
Yeah, people don't look.
So we could say they basically talk about you can heal yourself, you can become smarter. The rational function is very important. And right at the end here, I've cut a bit out, and he's talking. I forget the word, but then he rephrases the word, and he basically calls these kind of people that are reading it one way of the baculum. Do you know what a baculum is? It
sounds familiar, but not offhand.
It's the penis bone of a whale. He's calling them dicks. So, and here we go. This is really cool now. The little to the great. How great one only realizes when one identifies the wand with the Mahalingam, which is the great lingam. Maha means great in Eastern tongue.
Which is the pillar of fire at the heart of creation. That's the divine Shiva, the Mahalingam.
Is that right?
Yeah, you're talking about like that masculine creative force. It is the phallus, but it's the primordial fire of creation that Parvati has to rest and wake up, in order to produce creation. Yeah.
Up which Brahma flew at the rate of 84,000 yojanas a second for 84,000 Mahakalpas, down which Vishnu flew at the rate of 84,000 crosses of yojanas a second. Basically, I don't need to keep repeating these Indian words. They're talking about time and distance. He's saying that it's time and distance in here. Now, why would he be talking about such things? So if we move on to the next slide, please.
There you are.
Yep. So if we look to the bottom right, we can see it says we've got like south, north, east, and west. We've got a compass there. And I've already said it's a wheel of Psyche. We've got these various symbols and depictions of alchemical Athanors and Solomon's brass vessels that he uses to capture these demons. Brass being tin and copper mixed together, which is like saying Jupiter and Venus to alchemists. And I noticed when I looked within some of these symbols, I literally looked at these for 10 minutes before I started to make the slides. I just noticed things really quickly. So first of all, we're dealing with directions, as we often are with magicians, and then like a pole at the center. But we've got these images of Tanit. Can you see in the panel on the left of the diagrams? We can see a lady with her like a figure with her arms up. That's Tanit,
Yeah.
the old.
Tanit.
Yeah.
It's also it
Isn't
also
it?
makes me think of, in the Greek tradition, you have these really ancient Parthenia figures, these wooden Athena statues, where it's just, the earliest iterations of the of idols, where they had no form, they'd be made out of wood, and they would just be these female body shapes like that.
Yeah.
That's what they would
And
be.
often
You see, yeah.
it's
Go
called
ahead.
the Oran's posture. You see on cave walls more than anything. Like there's so many
Yeah.
figures like this on cave walls.
Well, even
So
that image of the moon that you see, right? The
Mhm.
moon, the waning moon, like that, is horns, and it is also the outstretched arms. This is a very common. All of
Yes.
those symbols are integrated into one.
Yeah, completely. And we've also got the wheel of the heavens above, which is also the geometry of the flora of life. And we've got two caduceae there. Isn't it from Carthage or somewhere like that, Tanit? It's
Yeah.
North Africa.
And
It's going to have
it's
to be
North
quite.
Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to have to be quite far down towards the equator, because the moon's crescent is low down, and the further you come up, the further you come up the world, the further round, and the more it looks like it does in our parts of the world.
Absolutely.
So we've also got a couple of caduceae there and some magical writing in a square. This is Tanit stuff. So I'm like, well, actually, I know a few things about that. I don't want to bore everybody with it, but a lot of this stuff is measuring the solstice and equinoxes and such things. It's the caduceus too was for, you could stick it in the ground and use it as a measuring device for the sun and tell what time of year it is and what time of day it is. It's quite intricate. There's been some French professors work that out about 20 years ago. It's not very well known, but I've looked at it. I'm like, yes, you've got something there.
Oh yeah, it's a sundial.
Yeah,
as well.
that kind of an idea.
Now,
Yeah,
let you know,
I
the
mean,
caduceus also have anchors on them.
yeah, and red cords often as well, and you put the red cords in the ground so you can tell what time it was, and then you wait half an hour, and then suddenly you put another red cord in there, and you got a compass. You can tell with the directions of things, just like we do these days. We put a stick in the ground, wait 20 minutes, and you can, if you mark out the two shadows that you get from that, you can tell what direction you're facing. So again, look, we're looking at space and time here again, aren't we? Avoiding all this demon psychology stuff, which is there. We've got the names of the demons, and we already said that Asmodeus, or the other guy, I forgot who it was, but he was like the opposite of Mars. He's like the masculine force toxified. So if we move on to the next image. Right. So this is a seal from in the Key of Solomon. And this is a satyr square, but it's written strangely. And funnily enough, when I first saw this years ago, not that I decoded it years ago, but I was like, that's because I can read a little Hebrew. And I was like, that's very strangely spelled. Because you could spell out it would read Sator, Aripol, Tenet, Opera, Rotas, which is famously a Saturnian square. And obviously Solomon's a Saturnian figure. So it says, if we read the top line from left to right, which is backwards for Hebrew, by the way, you got Shin, which is a sh sound. You got Aleph, which is like a glottal stop, but you could call it an A. Then you've got Tav, which is a normal T. Then you got Vav, which is more like a ooh sound. And then you got Resh, which is a fair enough R. But it's more like that's how they say it. It's just a weird way to say that word. You could quite easily say it with less letters in Hebrew and pronounce it better. So I was like, well, there's something weird there. What's all that about? And that inspired me to then look at my own satyr, the European satyr, and swap a few letters around because you've got several possibilities there. Like if we look at the letter T, so on the top left, we've got a gematria value table there, the way that the Hebrews calculate numbers because they didn't have separate figures for numbers. So if you take T, which is on the last column, if you look at 400, Tav, so that's a T sound. But you've also got Tet, which is number 9 on the first column and at the bottom, Tet. So you could swap those two and have no problem. And in fact, you do. You swap the Tav for a Tet, and you're away to help decode it. So I forgot who showed it to me. Well, a lovely person from the Discord. I apologize. I'm 2 hours into a podcast here. My brain's not working right. So I've actually put down the decoding for this. So for that, just for the first line, that's Shatur, it's Shin, Aleph, Tav, Vav, Resh. And those values are 300, 1, 400, 6, and 200. I multiply them together. I get 144 million. Massive number. But 144, anybody out there, is a harmonic number, one of the most harmonic numbers ever. And you'll see 144 all over the place. Isn't it? Isn't 144 to do with the how many people are taken up to heaven at the end of the Bible? Something like that.
The 144 chosen, yes.
Yeah.
144,000. Dion, you're muted.
Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
That's the crux of what they believe in. The 144,000 of them will be taken up, even though there's more than that in their congregations.
Well, that idea comes from a Wesleyan priest from the town I'm living in currently in Preston. That's another story. So, what I did was, because I know how to decode the proper the other Sator square. This is a later edition. The original Sator square is Mithraic or something like that, full of these Greek deities.
It's Pelasgian. It's even older.
Is it? The Sator square?
The Sator square, you're talking really old, man.
We must talk about this later.
Really old.
I'm going to keep you on.
I'm surprised you didn't ask. You should have talked to Old Boy about the Saturn.
Well,
square.
I will. No, I won't. Yeah. Did you watch that? It was good. He was good on that. Anybody out there? There's on my channel. There's an interview with me and Old Boy talking a bit about history, and then we start talking about other silly things, music and naughty potions. But anyway, so because I've decoded the other Sator square, I kind of know what it's getting at. And so I put this specific number in there, and I got a series of 5s down the calculator. And I'd already thought there are actually, there's 25 squares there in that square. There's actually 26. 26,000 years. So what happened was I put the calculation in, divided 144 million by 25,920 and got a series of 5. So I was like, well, there's 5 rows of 5 in there. What happens if I just take 144 million and divide it by 55,555, 5 5s, which is what's in that Sator square? What did I get? 25920, which is a precessional great year, 2592.02592.025, you know, just carries on into infinity of the exact number of the precessional great year, the Platonic great year. And we're dealing with a time deity here, Saturn. Well, Solomon is Saturn.
Yeah, the Mayan calendar is based off that number.
Like I've got a podcast coming up soon. I've got an Australian friend who's gone on a similar mad mission with these numbers as me. He's found out something from looking at Mayan temples about the conjunctions between Saturn and Jupiter, and found the most amazing things. He kept me up for 7 hours telling me about it. I had my head blown off. So I'm doing a podcast with him on Thursday about that. So look out for it. It might take me a couple of days to put it on because I want to give him his due diligence and put some extra images on there, because what he's found is, it goes, oh, it's so good. Can't believe it. Well done, Dane. There you go. You got your shouts out there, mate. So we got this processional year out of it. Simply put. And what an amazing they must have been really good at maths to be able to get, 144 million and then from those letters and get 259.2.0259. That's very difficult to do. I can't, and to get it to the 5 5s, how have you done that? That's genius level encryption. So if you go on to the next image, please. All right. So I'm looking through all those seals and symbols, and I was like, that's the same angle as the pattern that I found that takes all those numbers we were just talking about and puts them into a diagram by dividing that circle by 14. Each one of those interior angles is 2,160, which is a precessional month. If you divided that 25, 9, 20 up into 12, you would get 2160, which, by the way, is 6 times 6 times 6, 2160. So if we look everything on there, it just beautifully fits in. If look not at the circles and stuff on the outside, you can forget about that. But everything on the inside fits from the angle of the what looks like the light coming down to the extremities of this bowl shape to the shape of that Saturn sigil on the top left. I appreciate if you're on a phone or something like that, it's difficult to see, but it's just effing beautiful. I'm sure I can make a few adjustments and spend longer than 20 seconds on it, but I literally just flapped it over. But that fits.
You said you started with the number 14 by that what you did?
Around that circle, yeah.
Yeah, by cutting up Osiris into 14 pieces?
Exactly that, mate. Yeah.
Yes. To reconstruct
You'll see, Snappy, if you look at a lot of the more esoteric Wheel of Fortunes in the tarot, including there's one on my pillars, you know, these are pillars that I'm obsessed with. They actually have 14 around them. There's one where it's the 14 tents and 14 flags. There's lots. You'll see it. No, I've said it. You'll see it. Well, there you go.
Love it.
So I think I could fit that a little bit better, but if you take any look at it, pretty much 90% of it is delineated there, if not 95.
Wildness.
So there you go.
Wildness. So much fun.
I didn't intend it to be this. I've not shoehorned it in there or anything. I didn't have very long to get a presentation together, but I just saw it straight away. Unfortunately, somebody had sent me that Sator Square last week, whoever it was. In fact, I want to look them up to give them a shout out.
5 rows of 5. Like people that. 5 rows of 5.
People were saying in the chat that it's floral from the Myth and Lore Discord. So shout out to Floral.
Shout out. That was great. Thanks for the inspiration there.
All right. Well, this was so much fun, gentlemen. Amazing.
It was a really good one, this. Yeah, this is particularly good.
Are we doing more?
I think we got to do more. We need to dive into the Zohar now. I need to see what's going on in the Zohar, and I want to dive into the Lesser Key of Solomon as well, like the Goetia proper. Read the text.
Well, I'll do the great. If you'll dive into that, that was the lesser. But if you'll dive into that a bit more, especially the words in there and such, I'll do the greater. How about that?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Anything you guys want to leave us with? Any thoughts on the Solomonic tradition?
Oh, if you put a genie in a bottle, make sure you put a lid on that thing. Don't let it out.
Yeah, right.
I want to say Solomon means peace. It's the same as shalom, the greeting, and that's ultimately what the Temple of Solomon is. It's peace. It's your own peace. It's Buddha sat under the body tree. It's Jesus finally dead on that cross. It's peace. Right.
And remember, right? Like Solomon falls for Ashmedai when what? When he's engaged in those basal animalistic tendencies. He's fooling around with women. He's drinking wine. He's consuming all kinds of food. And then what happens? He gets replaced. You know, and so this is that kind of thing. You know, and conquering the demons is conquering the self. You know. So beautiful, magical stuff, really interesting stuff. We're going to keep exploring more of this Solomonic tradition as it evolves. We're now kind of moving out of the early Jewish and Islamic traditions, and now we're going to be moving more into the European weirdness. It's going to be lots of fun. Dion, any final words from your presentation? Any thoughts you want to leave with, or any ideas where you're heading?
Like, subscribe, share, leave some comments. Get ready. We're going to go on a magic carpet ride.
Yes, magic carpet. We should dive back into I should message our buddy Wretch We did an episode a while back. People should check it out. Our good friend Wretch is an independent scholar and academic, and he wrote an incredible book specifically looking at the image of the magic carpet across several different magical traditions and seeing it as this entheogenic thing, right? It's used in all these suffumigation rituals. The dyes that we've talked about were psychoactive. There's written words that are magical spells on it. It's a deep thing, and Wretch really goes to the depths of that image. If you're interested in it, you can find his work on academia.edu, Gunk Wretch, and it's Magic Carpets is the name.
And I think he has multiple works.
Oh yeah, he has many
that
books.
are like thousands of pages dealing with ancient Mesopotamian folklore. Just saying, Wretch is a walking encyclopedia.
He's a walking encyclopedia. Are you going to try
and get him on, Snappy?
Yeah,
he's a nuisance.
The thing
I know he's retired a little to do his work, but try and get him on.
I will keep pestering him to come on because he's such a brilliant person and a dear friend. But the thing with Wretch is that number one is that he hates social media and he's humble to a fault. So right there, that's a huge thing. And then the other thing is that he's following the muse, and the muse tells him to write books, and he's got very little time for much else. But I'm sure once his book is finished, I can at least get him on to talk about that.
To promote his new book, at least.
Yeah, at least he said he would do that, so we'll see. But yeah, everyone, like and subscribe. Tune in next week when we dive deeper. Expect us pursuing the later European iterations of this. So more Zohar, more Lesser Key of Solomon, Greater Key of Solomon, more Rosicrucian, more of that wildness. It's going to be fun. All right, everyone. Peace and love. Thanks again. Until next time. Take care.
Bye for now. Abracadabra.